Shh, don't tell anyone, but you're listening to the best kept business secret and his podcast, dedicated to helping you understand the successful business secrets that others don't want you to know, making no secret of success. Now, here's your host and quite possibly the best kept business secret anywhere, Mark Ford.
Hello again and welcome to your Best Kept Business Secret podcast with me, your host Mark Ford, possibly your best secret anywhere. Guys, got an amazing podcast for you this week. I've got a fantastic guest on this week's podcast. I get to interview somebody whose book has had a profound effect on what I do and why I do it. Todd Henry is an international best-selling author, Book of the Year, Amazon 2013, leadership consultant and speaker. He's written 4 books, but we also get to talk about the social media famous, giving value to others and wanting nothing in return, how leading is very, very difficult, and why graveyards are the richest places on the planet. So, without further ado, let's jump in straight to the podcast. Today's guest is Todd Henry. Todd Henry teaches leaders and organizations how to establish practices that lead to everyday brilliance. He is the author of 4 books, The Accidental Creative, Die Empty, Louder Than Words, and his latest one, Herding Tigers, which have been translated into more than a dozen languages. And he speaks and consults across dozens of industries on creativity, leadership, and passion for work. One of those books, Die Empty, was named by Amazon.com as one of the best books of 2013 and has actually had a profound effect on me and my life in business. But we'll come on to that in a bit. So doing the work and leading the work are very, very different things. And when you make the transition from a maker to a manager, you give ownership of things to your team, even though you could do them yourself better and probably faster. So what we're going to do in the next half an hour is we are going to be talking about his books. We are going to be talking practical advice about the confidence and getting the skills to get an environment together so you can give your clients confidence, you can give your team confidence, you can give everybody around you confidence in getting the best out of themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, it's absolutely my pleasure to be interviewing the one and only Mr. Todd Henry. How are you, Todd?
Hey, Mark, I'm great, especially after that intro. Wow, that was something else.
Yeah, all I'm saying, mate, is you've got a lot to live up to now.
That's right.
What the listeners probably don't know is that I interviewed you a few years back, and I want to touch on one of your books before we come on to your latest one, Herding Tigers. Die Empty. Now, for the listeners, Die Empty is pretty much about a book about getting the most out of yourself. And it's one of those books that just happened to come across my lap 2 weeks after my sister-in-law suddenly and tragically passed away. Same age as me, mother of 3 kids, day after Boxing Day, and unfortunately just dropped down dead in front of her parents. And it's one of those moments in your life where you suddenly have to, count your chickens, and you sort of like start looking back at your life and start looking to the future and understanding what life is all about. So Todd, can I just say that actually the book in itself was just an absolute gift for me. It really was. It made me think about where I was and is now turned into what I'm doing now. So I want to say a big thank you to you. But what was the trigger for writing this book, Die Empty? Because I genuinely think it's so profound that everybody, if you haven't got a copy, go get a copy. So Todd, please tell us the story behind writing that book.
Yeah, so my first book was called The Accidental Creative, and it was really about sort of organizing your world so that you can have better ideas more consistently. And, because I spent a lot of my time working with creative professionals and helping them be better at what they do. And then I realized there are a significant number of people that I was working with who were very organized and they were getting a lot done, but they sort of felt like they weren't necessarily doing the right things per se, right? So they were making a lot of progress, but maybe in the wrong direction. And so I just really thought, there needs to be a book that's not just about getting a lot done, but making sure that you're putting the work that's inside of you that maybe gets pushed to the bottom in the midst of the hustle and bustle of daily life, that you're really helping get that work out into the world in some capacity. We live in an age where we have endless opportunity to connect, endless opportunity to know things, to interact with people, to engage, to reach people that we never could have imagined reaching 10 years ago. And with that endless opportunity, sometimes we end up chasing things that are expedient, things that make sense, but aren't necessarily reflective of our deeper passions and callings in our life. And so I really wanted to write a book that helped people identify some of those deeper passions and callings and help them put them out in the world in a way that they could be of benefit to other people. And that whole story about Die Empty actually came out of a meeting I was in, I guess it's about 16 years ago now. And we were in the middle of a project that was a pretty big and substantial and risky project. And the person leading the meeting, I think, sensed that some of us in the room were a little bit nervous maybe about this thing that we were doing. And out of the blue, he just said, "What do you think is the most valuable land in the world?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. That's kind of a weird question." And he said, "Well, we threw out a bunch of guesses, right? Oil fields of the Middle East, gold mines of South Africa, Manhattan." And then the person leading the meeting said, "No, you're all wrong." And then quoting the late Miles Monroe, he said, "I believe the most valuable land in the world is the graveyard, because in the graveyard are buried all of the unwritten novels, all of the unexecuted ideas, all of the unreconciled relationships, all of the things that people carried with them their entire life." And they said, "Yeah, someday I'm going to get around to that. Someday I'm actually going to act on that idea." And they pushed it into the future till one day they reached the bookend of their life, and all of that value was buried with them dead in the ground because they didn't make an effort on a daily basis to put it out into the world where it can be of use to others. That's why it's the most valuable land in the world, because all of that value was buried with them. And that struck me in a really profound way. I went back to my office and I wrote "Die Empty" on my wall of my office, and I wrote it in my notebook. And really that became the defining ethic of my life for a number of years. And then, 10 years later, who would have known I would get to write a book that sort of had that as the central theme. But, I think really if we just embrace this ethic of, listen, the gifts that are inside of you, the ideas that you have, the things that are being called out of you, which, by the way, Mark, this is what calling is. Our calling isn't something we're called to. It's something that's being called out of us in response to our environment. So whatever that is, it's not for you. Your body of work is not for you. It's for other people. Your body of work isn't about, look how great I am. It's in service of other people. And we need everyone to be faithful to what's being called out of them. And so, really that was sort of the essence of the book Die Empty is, are you really putting the stuff into the world that's inside of you? Or are you allowing the forces of mediocrity to cause you to settle in prematurely and to optimize prematurely?
I love the whole premise is that, obviously some of the best ideas possibly the world has never seen, and I mean never seen,
yes,
are in graveyards. And I it's one of those things that when I talk to clients now, I sort of said, look, what's stopping you from doing this, or what's stopping you from doing that? And I said, look, nobody ever lies on their deathbed saying, I wish I hadn't. They all lie on their deathbed and say, I wish I had. We literally get up to that last minute, that last moment, and we go, why didn't we do that? And it's the maddest thing. And actually in that book, you lead with a brilliant story. And I know it's available on YouTube, and I'll put the links in the show notes, but tell everybody about the story of, I think it's Candy Chang.
Right.
Yeah. Tell everybody about that story, because I thought it sets up the book absolutely beautifully.
Yeah, so I came across this story, and she actually did a wonderful TED Talk about this, and I would really recommend people watch her TED Talk because she explains it far better than I will. But she was an artist and an urban planner, and she was moved by the sudden death of one of her friends, and she wanted to do something in response to that. And so she found an old abandoned building in New Orleans where she was living in her neighborhood, and on the side of it, she just painted a chalkboard, and then she stenciled at the top of the chalkboard, "Before I die, I want to," right? And then put a bunch of blank lines below it and put some chalk out, and just sort of waited to see what would happen. It was just a handful of days before people started filling up the chalkboard with all of these amazing things. Before I die, I want to see my kids graduate. Before I die, I want to sing for millions. Before I die, I want to, all of these things that people had been carrying around with them and found expression through this wall. And I think it was a very provocative work of art for a couple of reasons. First of all, because, it puts on display all of these ambitions that people have. But second of all, I think without some sort of provocative moment like that, where you're really forced to wrestle with these deeper ambitions, I think many people carry those around with them and they never really think about it. Well, what really do I want to do before I die? Is there really something that I'm just kind of carrying around with me? But because we lack urgency and because we lack diligence in our life, then we often let those things just live beneath the surface. And so I think that is a worthwhile exercise for anyone to do, just to consider, what is it that I maybe have even secretly harbored, or maybe I lay in bed at night and I think about it and I just kind of brush it off because it seems impractical. But what are those things that I know that if I die tomorrow, I'm going to regret in some capacity? It could be a conversation, reconciling with your father, maybe. It could be, calling your grandmother and just, thanking her for what she's been to the family. It could be a trip that you've always wanted to take and you just think, well, it's not convenient because work is busy and it's just not the right time. It could be anything like that. But and by the way, this is not an endorsement of the live life like it's your last day mentality. I don't believe in that, because if it's my last day, I'll tell you what, Mark, I'm eating pizza. I'm probably treating myself terribly. I'm good, because I know that I'm not going to live tomorrow, right? I'm not thinking about eating healthy and, working out and taking care of myself. That's not what I'm doing on my last day on earth. But I do think that we have to live with the urgency of understanding that we only get to live this day one time. In many ways, this is, right now we're recording this on March 5th. This is the only March 5th, 2019 I'm ever going to get to live, ever. And so, I have to recognize that I have a finite number of days on this planet, and that someday those days are going to run out. They just are, as my friend Brian likes to say, the death rate is hovering right around 100%, at some point we are all going to die. And so we have to recognize that there is some urgency about how we spend our days and how we spend our hours and how we spend our energy and where we spend our focus. There's some urgency around that because we don't get it back. We don't get to do this again.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, it's like this year, literally since the turn of the new year, I've realized that this year I'm 45. Now, to some people, that doesn't sound particularly old. But obviously, I'm now 6 years older than my sister-in-law ever was going to be. God bless her.
Right.
And I've kind of realized that in the next sort of 10, 15 years, I'm going to start running out of steam. And that's not because, of how I'm treating my body or anything like that. It's just that, do you know what? There are generations behind me that are going to do jobs, are going to create things that I've not even dreamt of yet. I look at my 16-year-old son, and he's going to do jobs. He is going to be employed or be self-employed or run a business or whatever, and he's going to do something that I haven't even thought of yet, and that is mind-bending.
Oh yes.
So this year I've literally got stuck into it. So somebody actually turned around to me and said that by the end of this year I will have a nice little small business media company going on, because I've got shares in an online magazine. I'm concentrating on the podcasts. I'm concentrating on the videos, and I'm aiming them at small businesses up to their first £1 million, because there's nothing out there for those people. And this is why I wanted to get you on, because you're not one of these speakers that will go, hey, yeah, I'd like to tell you about my 35th millionth quid that I've just earned, and I haven't put my bins out for the last 10 years. Nobody, it's just not relatable. So I've realized that this was the year I was going to have to do it. This was the year, that's it. The urgency really kicked in, and it's amazing. So we're 3 months into the year, and just the next 9 months looks so powerful. It's so attractive. It's unreal if you live with that element of urgency in your own life and in your business, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It absolutely is. It changes the way that you frame up your days. And by the way, I want to be really clear that when we talk about this concept of die empty, I'm not talking about collapsing over the finish line every day, completely spent. This is not a leave it all on the field talk. I mean, that's just not, there has to be a portfolio in your life. And also, by the way, when I talk about this, I'm not just talking about your work. Understand, for many people, the biggest part of their body of work is going to be their family. It's going to be some, social initiative that they're involved in financially or in terms of their time and their energy. It's going to be something other than their job. Now, their job is important because our jobs are where we spend a huge chunk of our lives. And so how you approach your work, your job is significant because it speaks a lot about who you are and what you value, how you bring yourself to your job, especially when you don't really like your job. How you bring yourself to your job matters a whole lot because your body of work isn't just what you do, it's also how you do it. It's how you approach it. But for many people, I think it's important to recognize that your body of work is comprised of every place in your life where you add value where it didn't previously exist. So with your family, how you build into your children or how you build into your spouse or to your loved one, that is a significant part of your body of work. That is work. It is work to choose to build into someone instead of tearing them down. It is work to do that because all of our instincts want to say, I'm going to take what's mine. All of our instincts want us to have transactional relationships instead of relationships of generosity and blessing. So we have to choose willingly to add value in areas of our life where we want to claim value. At the end of our lives, Mark, we're going to be remembered for what we gave, not what we took, right? Yeah. Nobody's going to say, boy, that person was a great consumer. They're going to remember us for the value that we contributed to the people around us, the way we built into other people. And there are people, I believe firmly to the core of my being, there are people that none of us have ever heard of who have built the most magnificent bodies of work because of the way they approach their life. And they did not die a rich person. They didn't die with their name on a building. They didn't die with a social movement named after them. They didn't. But they loved their neighborhood. They were great citizens. They built into their children. Their children are contributing citizens. They loved their spouse or their loved one. And they died knowing that they have spent themselves in a meaningful way. And there are people whose names all of us can recite, off the top of our head, who are very well known, who have done a lot of really impressive things to the outside world, but have left a wake of destruction in their path. And their body of work is a little pile of dirt compared to the mountain of a body of work that this other person we've never heard of has built, because they were faithful to what was being called out of them, and it was about what they gave, not about what they took. And so I think for all of us listening, we just have to ask, what is being called out of me, and how can I be faithful to that today? How can I build a little delta today that's going to make a difference? And that little delta over time is going to add up into something substantial if I choose every single day. Gretchen Rubin said, Mark, what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. And I think that's a great observation. It's the little things we do every day that ultimately build our body of work, not those big acts of the will that we occasionally engage in.
Yeah, see, it's a really interesting point actually, because I've been stood here, and certainly recently I've sort of like I've almost complained about it on social media, is that there seem to be a lot of people that seem to be promoting themselves as a personality for doing nothing. So they are, they're the type of people that will ask what time I go to the toilet, or, do you prefer tea and coffee? And they confuse that the social media fame with giving value, which they're kind of missing the point. It's almost like becoming famous for famous sake. And it's really interesting that you sort of like said there's probably a plethora of people out there that are never going to be famous, and they don't want to be famous. They just want to leave value behind. They want to be that person that has helped 50 businesses and not be the Gary V's of the world, where they've helped thousands of businesses, but actually at great expense in Gary V's pocket. Do you see what I mean? And I think perhaps certainly in the last couple of years, I know we're going slightly off topic, slightly tangenting. I'm starting to see a lot more people being famous for the sake of being famous, rather than trying to, as you quite rightly described, trying to give value and leave value every single day. Would you agree?
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, there was a time when being a celebrity meant you were being celebrated for something you did, right? Like there was a time when you became known for something you did. I think about it, before he died, Neil Armstrong lived not far down the road from us, where we live. And, I just remember I would see him on occasion. I would see him, in the most odd places, like, a grocery store around the neighborhood or something. I'd be like, that was the first man on the moon, like rightly famous. He was, he did something.
I'm guessing. I'm guessing he was quite unassuming when you.
You would never know. You would never know if you didn't know who it was. Like you would never know who it was, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, I feel like we're missing the point. We've come to believe that being known is the point rather than being known for something. Being known for something. What is the thing that you are doing? What are you known for? What is the value you're producing? How are you contributing to society? And let's face it, most of the people that we consider, quote unquote, social media famous today, and they're all going to be forgotten in 3 years, or 5 years, and they're going to leave nothing in their wake. Now, there are a handful of people who are the exceptions, right? But what are we teaching our children about what it means to be a contributive citizen? What are we teaching our children about what it means to be successful in our culture? And I think that we own, you mentioned you have a 16-year-old son. I have a 16-year-old as well. He's our oldest. And we're trying our best to talk about not recognizing that there are a lot of things that culture values right now that aren't necessarily the things that we would consider success. Yeah. So I am far more content doing my work every single day, producing value every single day, knowing that hearing from you, Mark, that a book that I wrote, I actually wrote it in like 2011 or 2012, right? A book I wrote like 8 or 9 years ago had a profound impact on your life. Like that, those kinds of stories are just incredibly moving to me, because that's the entire reason. Like I was thinking about you as I was writing that book, and how that would impact your life. Like that's the most profound thing to me. And you mentioned the thing about, people ask you like, what kind, do you take coffee or tea or, whatever. And it's like asking a writer, like what kind of pen they write with, like going up to Stephen King and saying, Stephen, what kind of pen do you use when you write, or what kind of software tool? Because as if it's about the tool, or as if it's about there's been this sort of whole thing about morning routines and this whole thing about like how you spend your day. And really the most important thing is, are you putting your butt in the seat and doing the work every day? Are you committing yourself to sitting down and doing the work when it's hard, when it's raining outside, when it's sunny outside, and you want to go do something fun? Are you putting your butt in the seat and doing the work? That's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter. And it's why somebody like a Stephen King or somebody like that would laugh at you if you asked them. They were, I don't know, like the cheap Bic from the local market. Like that's what I use. Like, legal pads from the stationery store. Like, I don't know. It doesn't matter, because it's about applying yourself. It's about doing the work. It's not about the tools that you use. And I think that's the same mindset that, sort of leads to this, I want to be famous for being famous kind of thing versus being famous for something that I've actually produced.
Yeah, it's almost like asking J.K. Rowling. If anybody knows the story of J.K. Rowling, basically she was on her ass. She was on benefits. She was broke. I've been to the cafe where she started writing Harry Potter, and it's almost like going up to her going, well, which particular seat did you sit in? Because if I sit there, I'll get these waves, right, of creativity. Oh, come on. And obviously in my field, the reason I do what I do, and the reason that perhaps I'm as effective as I am, is because I don't believe that one size fits all. It's really interesting that you sort of like everybody's. There are little carbon copies of people all over the place, and sometimes you can see that. You can see people using the same phrases, the same words as everybody else. And when it comes to sort of like business coaching, what really frustrates me is that obviously there is a global phenomenon that has the word action and coaching it. But they have a 12-step program. And the assumption is that everybody should go through that 12-stage program. Now, that's great for some businesses, but I believe that every single business owner is as unique as their fingerprint, because they have different wants, they have different needs, they have different desires. The assumption that every single business owner wants to sell their business and then start another one is false. It's wrong. Because actually, I could have somebody sat in front of me who would just like to be a millionaire and die happy. I could have somebody in front of me that wants to earn 100 grand a year, have 2 nice cars on the drive, and be able to go away. I could have somebody else in front of me that just wants to pay for the university tuition for their son or daughter. It's so unique, and I think that we get caught up a lot in, what are the tools, what are the shortcuts, what's the silver bullet, what's this, what's that, rather than just concentrating on, and quite rightly what you said, is, are you sat down, are you doing the work that will give value to your customers, to your clients, to society, to the community? And guess what? The money kind of takes care of itself after that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, for a lot of people, the best way to begin to wrangle that to the ground a little bit is to ask the question, how do I define greatness in my life? Because I think how you define greatness defines you. I think that if many people spend their life chasing vapor because they don't have a solid definition of what success will look like. And so they just keep chasing something different. They keep running away from what they have and chasing something else because they think something else is going to make them happy. Something else is going to make them happy. And they don't have a clear definition of what greatness looks like. So for some people, maybe greatness looks like, listen, I'm really great at making money, and the more money I make, I can be more generous. And so I'm going to make as much money as I can, because I know that when I make as much money as I can, I'm going to be able to give away a lot more money. And that's just my gifting. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's great. Nothing wrong with that. For some people, it's, I'm just going to crank out work day after day, and I know I'm never going to be celebrated, but the body of work I'm building is substantial because it's impacting lives. Great. That's fantastic, right? But I think, to your point, this cookie cutter, one size fits all thing is, everybody's looking for the formula. There is no formula. There's no formula for, and that's the thing that's maddening to a lot of people. Like, they want to buy into some kind of formula that's going to make them X, Y, Z. And all the formulas that you see are basically somebody else backward engineering how they got to where they are, but it worked for them. It may or may not work for you. And so I think it's just really important that we can learn from best practices, for sure. It's really important that we understand that we can see patterns, spot patterns. We can learn from the stories of other people, for sure. And there are global principles. There are sort of universal principles at work, for sure. No question. But if you're looking for a formula that all you have to do is just basically do X, Y, Z, and you're going to end up with what you want, it's not going to happen until you put your butt in the seat and you do the work and you take risks, you make yourself vulnerable, you put yourself out there, you begin doing things that are necessary in order to, listen, Seth Godin loves to say all the easy stuff has been done. And I agree with that. Like, all the easy stuff's been done. We don't pay people for the easy stuff anymore. If it's easy, then it's probably not that valuable. You have to train yourself to take risks and do the hard stuff, because the hard stuff is what's valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Mate, let's move on to your latest book. And great. I love it. It's called Herding Tigers, and if it was here in the UK, it'd probably be called Herding Cats, because that's one of our favourite phrases over here. Trying to get any team together to do anything is like herding cats rather than herding tigers. Where did this one come from? Where did the desire to write this particular book come from, my friend?
So all of my books have resulted from me being in the marketplace and observing what my clients are dealing with. And, like I mentioned earlier, I wrote Die Empty because I noticed I'd written a book about being organized and effective creatively, but were people organizing around the right things? Well, not always. Well, in the same way, people would come up to me, I would speak at a conference or something, people would come up to me and say, hey, thank you for what you've done in my life. Thanks for helping me get organized, but let me introduce you to my manager, right? Who has no clue what I need as a creative professional to thrive. And so I really wanted to write a book that was targeted at the creative professionals, at the managers of creative professionals, and helping them understand, what do highly creative people need from their manager in order to produce their best work every day. And so that's what herding tigers is about. And it's funny you bring up that phrase, herding cats, because the title is actually a play on that phrase, because you often hear leading creative people is like herding cats, and I always correct them and say, no, it's like herding tigers. These are powerful, majestic creatures with strong wills, and if you get it right, they're beautiful, they're majestic, they'll do amazing things. If you get it wrong, they will turn around and rip you to shreds. That's kind of what it is to lead a creative team. And so I sort of wanted to give people a sense of, like, herding cats, I feel like is sort of a little bit insulting to creative people. Like, oh, these flighty little creatures that just can't be corralled and they just go their own way. No, not at all. Like, these are powerful strategic beings who are capable of amazing things, but they have to be led properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's massively interesting that the whole book is centered around leading, and it's a conversation that I've had recently with a HR specialist who has said that every single business owner and every single manager, they're accidental business owners, they are accidental managers. And the reason being is that no one at school ever in a careers lesson ever turned around to somebody and said, I'd like to be a manager, please, or I'd like to be a business owner. There's a set of circumstances that have normally led them to that place, and normally the manager, especially in a team, has normally been sort of promoted to a place of management because somebody somewhere realized they were quite good at what they were doing as opposed to quite good at managing people. Does that make sense? Nobody's ever been sort of like put in a place of going, you're very good at managing people, we're going to make you a manager. No, they sort of like realized actually you're very good at what you do, so therefore for some reason in our mad little brains we go, that must make them a really good manager.
That's right. But doing the work and leading the work are fundamentally different skill sets. So you can be really good at doing the work, but not good at leading the work, because leading the work is about giving away responsibility. Leading the work is about developing influence, not leading by control. Leading the work is about making a transition from a maker mindset, which is it's about me, the value I produce, the work I do, to a manager mindset, which is I'm responsible for everything that happens on my team, whether or not it's under my direct control. And that's a fundamentally different mindset, but we don't often train people that way. Instead, we make it all about the work, not about how the work gets done, about the people who are doing the work, which is really what leading is about. Leading is about people. It's not about the work. If you get the people piece right and you get the right people in the right place and you develop those people, then the work is going to take care of itself over time. I mean, it's going to obviously take a lot of shaping and refining, but the work is going to take care of itself. If you have the right people in the room, you give them what they need, you equip them, and you set them up for success. But I think often we don't think about it that way, and leaders make it about them instead of about their team.
Yes, they do, and that actually leads really nicely into the next question, because I really like this question. Is that you spend an awful lot of time talking about the role of trust in leading, which but share a few ways that leaders can blow trust that's been built up and not even realize that they're doing it. What ways can they absolutely rip apart a team with losing trust?
Yeah, so one very simple way that we lose trust is by what I call declaring undeclarables. And this means we make promises we can't keep. So, hey, if you work this Saturday, I'll give you next Thursday off. Something came up and I can't give you Thursday off. But if you work Thursday, I'll give you next Monday off. Or we are absolutely going to go with your idea on this project. The client decided not to go with your idea. We're going to go with a different idea. Or you were absolutely next in line for promotion. Somebody came in and changed it, and whatever. We declare undeclarables. And the reason we do that is because we're insecure as leaders. We want to quell the uncertainty. We want to quell the insecurity on our team and in ourselves. And so we declare something hoping that it'll be true. As a leader, we should never promise something that we can't absolutely guarantee that we're going to deliver on. Because every little broken promise, I don't care how small it is a breach of trust. And that breach of trust will eventually add up to substantial lack of trust on the team. We think about trust, Mark, like a bank account. We think if we put a little bit in, we can take a little bit out. And as long as we keep a positive balance, it's okay. Trust is not like a bank account. Trust is more like a water balloon. You fill it up, you fill it up, you fill it up. But if you puncture it, even in a tiny way, it's going to spill out everywhere. You're going to lose trust everywhere, not just in that one area. So we have to be very careful as leaders to manage trust consistently every single day.
Okay. So in the last chapter, and this almost like falls into what we were talking about earlier about people just being famous for the sake of being famous, and they start calling themselves thought leaders, which always amuses no end. I mean, what is a thought leader? Who came up with that phrase? But you challenge people to be a leader worth following. Mm-hmm. What are the few ways that leaders can make sure that they don't get sucked in to like the organizational swamp and basically, or even the social media swamp, if anything, especially if they're self-employed, and
right.
What makes them unique and compelling to the people that follow them or to their team?
Well, I think first of all, you have to understand what you stand for. You have to have a decision-making framework that is independent of circumstances. If your team sees that you're easily swayed by whatever is in your best interest from, in any given situation, you're going to lose their trust. They're not going to follow you because they're going to see that you're in it for yourself, and it's going to create an everyone for themselves mentality in the organization. However, if they see you making decisions against your best interests, like defending the team against overly demanding management in the organization, if they see that you will not throw them under the bus, that you will always take responsibility for a bad decision, then you're going to earn their trust and they will follow you. If they see that you have an independent framework for making decisions, if they see that you live out your values as a manager, then they will follow you. And really, at the end of the day, being a leader worth following is about recognizing that your role is not about you. Your role is about the people that you're leading. I mean, I challenge people at the end of the book, listen, in 100 years, 150 years, nobody's going to remember your company. I'm sorry, but they're not. There are a handful of companies that have been around for 150 years. Like, nobody's going to remember the company. Certainly nobody's going to remember that project that you're working on right now that is consuming all of your energy and focus. Nobody is going to remember that in 150 years. But the way that you lead people every single day, the impact you make on their lives, the way that you shape them is going to resound for generations to come, because they are going to turn around and lead other people according to how you lead them. And then those people are going to lead other people. And you can create generational ripples by getting this right. So my challenge for people is be a leader who makes echoes. Be a leader whose impact echoes through generations to come, because they were willing to do what was difficult, but do it in the right way. And so that's my challenge to people. Be a leader who makes echoes.
Okay, so Todd, we're gonna finish this off, because literally we have rip-roared through. We've done like nearly 40 minutes already. This is absolutely rip-roared along, mate. I always ask this question because it puts you on the spot, but it also, normally the answer that people first come out with is normally the most truthful one. If I could take you back in my little time machine to when you started all this, to when you started on this little path of sort of writing your first book, and then writing the second, third, and fourth, and then doing what you do now, what would you do differently that would just make not life easier, but hindsight is probably the most exact science in the world. So, what would you just do differently that would just have made things that little bit more easy for you at the time?
I would spend more time thinking and less time doing. I think I produce a tremendous amount of content and value through the work that I do. I write books, do podcasts, I give speeches, I travel a lot, I work with clients. But what gets sacrificed in that is thought time, time to just sit and connect dots and be creative. And I probably would tell myself, listen, you are going to be very busy over the next handful of years. You have to protect the flame, keep the pilot light lit. And that pilot light is all of that time you used to spend just sitting around thinking and dreaming and connecting dots and all of that. Like, that's where all this value came from. You need to keep doing that. because you need to keep the pilot light lit. So I think I would probably challenge myself, spend more time thinking than I know that I have done over the last 5 or 6 years, just as things have been insanely busy. And that's actually something that's funny, because that's one of my themes for this year, is to think more. And I have regular times of thinking and journaling and writing and that kind of stuff, but I think I used to spend days. I would go away for a day and just spend a day doing nothing but thinking about a creative problem, and would come back with all kinds of ideas and value. And I know that sounds luxurious, and it is, quite frankly, to do that, but I need to recommit to that. And so that's probably what I would have told myself several years ago.
Okay, so what's happening in the life of Todd? What exciting stuff is coming up for the rest of this year then, my friend?
So obviously I'm on the road quite a bit. I'm speaking at a lot of events this year, which will be great. Working on a couple of different book projects at the same time, which I can't talk about yet, but working on a couple of different book projects.
Squirrel, love that, love it.
And I continue to do the Axel Creative podcast a couple times a week. We've been doing this since 2005. So the Axel Creative podcast, and then I have a show called The Daily Creative, which is a daily creative show that
I've been following it on Facebook, my friend.
Well, good. Well, fantastic. So very, very excited about that. And so just, very, very excited about all the things going on.
Brilliant. Todd, I'm going to put all the links that people can follow you on Facebook, your podcast, buy your books and all that sort of stuff. And if there is one book that you're going to buy this year, go and buy Die Empty. Do yourself a favor. Go and read it. Tell me I'm an idiot if you wish, but genuinely, absolutely life-changing for me. And from the bottom of my heart, I really do appreciate you actually writing that book. I know although you said you kind of wrote it for me, you didn't. But, it would just landed in my lap at the right time and put me on the path that I'm currently on. So forever I shall always say thank you to that. But guys, I hope you've got so much out of that interview. Todd has given us so many value bombs. Todd, thank you so much for doing this. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
And that's it for this particular podcast. Wow, absolute stacks of stuff we talked about in that. Hope you enjoyed it. Listen, guys, if you're really liking these podcasts, if you're really loving these interviews, go to YouTunes. YouTunes? I've just created a business, ladies and gentlemen. YouTunes. Go to iTunes even. Go to iTunes and go and give us a review. I'd really, really appreciate that if you could just spend 30 seconds of your time just giving us a review of the podcast. I'd really greatly appreciate it. And do you know what? I want to do something for you. If you go to my website, www.markford.uk, that's www.markford.uk, I'm going to give you a free copy of my latest book. A free copy of 101 questions that business owners need to answer to grow their business. A free downloadable copy of that book, which is available on Amazon and loads of other places for $10.99 at the moment. You can have a free copy. Just go to www.markford.uk. Fill in the little form, click on the thingies, click on the form, and I will send it directly to your inbox as a way of saying thank you. Thank you for spending time with me listening to this stuff. And I'm hoping genuinely you're getting something out of it. Guys, until next time, go out, be brilliant, be the best that you can be, and most of all, die empty. See you soon. Take care.
Shh, don't tell anyone. But you're listening to the best kept business secret and his podcast, dedicated to helping you understand the successful business secrets that others don't want you to know, making no secret of success.